no matter what profession we are in. To keep honing our skills, we must learn from those with experience. In Grass-Fed Beef for a Post-Pandemic World, Ridge and Lynn share their lifetimes of experience. In fact, every chapter highlights stories of people, places, and predicaments that Ridge encountered over the years as his understanding of grass-fed beef production developed. I learned from this book, and am confident that you will too. Gabe Brown, June 2022. Preface. Sometimes I say that I learned to farm in the 19th century. 2 years out of college, I quit my job as an environmental advocate in Washington, D.C., to become a farmer at a New England Living History Museum. Driving north to Old Sturbridge Village, I was more than happy to leave the vagaries of Capitol Hill politics behind. From early childhood, I have been interested in farming above all else. My new job would allow me to research agricultural practices of the early 1800s and work outdoors through the seasons, using old-style tools and implements in the museum's fields and barns. At the Living History site, I met Lynne Pledger, who was already working there in a position parallel to mine, researching and demonstrating farm tasks performed by rural women in the early 19th century, including milking cows and making butter and cheese. With jobs that immersed us in cow-centric daily routines, Lynn and I came to realize that farm families in that era, actually right up until World War II, managed their cattle in ways that worked with nature rather than against it. Cows were bred to calve in the spring when the grass started growing. Cattle were raised and fattened on grass and forage, with hay in winter. Corn was raised for human consumption as cornmeal, not for cattle. Cattle deposited their manure and urine all over the pasture, fertilizing the soil. Of course, not all farm practices from the good old days were good. For example, farmers plowed their fields for annual crops. Now we know that plowing allows soil carbon to oxidize, releasing it to the atmosphere, whereas perennial pastures for livestock keep the soil protected by vegetation. But considering the global harm from today's industrial agriculture, in many ways the old-fashioned approach looked better to us than what replaced it. Chemical fertilizers and biocides, and the confinement of livestock to CAFOs, or confined animal feeding operations. In 1973, Lynn and I married and bought 34 acres in rural Massachusetts, where we planted organic gardens and fruit trees, kept honeybees, tapped maples for syrup, and raised livestock. We had 2 children and now have 3 grandchildren. Then, after 45 years, we divorced. But throughout those decades, and continuing right up to the present, we have worked together on farming and sustainability issues. Even in the early days of our marriage, the scope of our agricultural interests reached beyond our homestead. We had barely settled into our rural community in the early 1970s when we became painfully aware of the decline of dairy farming all around us. Every time I heard that another local farm was going out of business, it felt like a death in the family. I realized then that developing a productive homestead would never be enough for me. I wanted nothing less than to live in a thriving agricultural economy, though I did not foresee how agriculture in the Northeast could regain its former glory, or how I might contribute to that outcome. Then a project beckoned that grew out of work we had begun at Old Sturbridge Village, when we were searching for authentic breeds of livestock to populate the fields and barnyards of the Living History Museum. At that time, we had started an organization to identify and promote endangered breeds of livestock in the United States: cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, horses, and poultry. In 1977, a small group of us renewed our commitment to that goal, and I became the executive director of the American Minor Breeds Conservancy, while Lynn